The autumn sun filtered through the dusty windows of the old house as Jennifer Grace leaned over a box of family belongings. Her grandmother Evelyn's house was in dire need of renovation, and the past few weeks had been a whirlwind of activity. Removing old furniture, clearing the attic, and sorting through decades of accumulated clutter. But today, something made her linger in the attic. The wooden beams creaked underfoot, and the old photo albums and faded newspapers in her hands were a reminder of days long gone. Jennifer turned over yet another pile of yellowed letters when her fingers brushed against something solid. It was a worn leather diary with a lock. The cover was dark, almost black, but the stitches were still strong as if someone had carefully preserved it for years. Jennifer gently tugged at the lock, which surprisingly opened with ease, and she flipped through the diary. On the first page was a neat signature, Evelyn Grace, 1931. "That's Grandma's handwriting," Jennifer whispered, barely able to believe she had found something so personal. She began to leaf through the pages, amazed at how detailed Evelyn had been in describing each day of her life during those difficult times. The entries were filled with stories of family, friends, and the hardships they endured during the Great Depression. Jennifer couldn't pull herself away from the words until she came across a page that stood out in its tone. "Today, we hid it. I'm afraid someone might discover our secret. But we had no other choice. This treasure must remain hidden until better times. It will help our family when no one else can." Jennifer held her breath. Treasure? She flipped further and saw strange symbols and drawings that resembled a map. Her heart began to race. This wasn't just an old memory. Her grandmother was talking about something real, something hidden in their hometown. "We did everything to ensure no one could find it, but if someone in the family ever decides to search for it, it must be done the right way. Here is the first key. Read the next entry." Mysterious lines and drawings continued to appear on the pages, like a puzzle Jennifer was meant to solve. The world around her disappeared as she realized that in her hands lay a true mystery, stretching back into the past, one that her grandmother Evelyn may have never shared with anyone. The next morning, Jennifer woke up with a sense of unease. Her grandmother's diary was still on her mind, and the mysterious entries were haunting her thoughts. She tried to return to her usual tasks, planning to finish the renovation, but the idea of the hidden treasure wouldn't leave her alone. It all seemed so strange, as if it were a story from a fictional book, not her family's history. Realizing she couldn't figure out these old entries on her own, Jennifer decided to seek help. There was one person in town who might be able to assist, Michael Rivers, the local historian. He often appeared at events and lectures, sharing stories about the past of their small town. Michael was an expert on local legends, archives, and documents, and if anyone could unravel the story hidden in the diary, it would be him. Jennifer quickly found his number on the town's historical society website and dialed. On the other end, a calm, confident voice answered. "This is Michael Rivers." "Hello, this is Jennifer Grace," she began, trying to sound confident. "You probably know my house. It's the old estate on the outskirts, which belonged to my grandmother Evelyn. I found something unusual among her belongings and think I need help with the historical side of things. I'd like to meet and discuss it with you." Michael paused for a moment, likely processing what he had just heard. "Of course, Jennifer. Evelyn Grace was a respected figure in our town. When would you like to meet? Could we do today? I think you'll be interested in what I've found," she said, hesitating slightly, still unsure how exactly to approach solving the mystery. They agreed to meet at a cafe on Main Street in an hour. Jennifer grabbed the diary, holding it tightly as if she feared someone might snatch it from her hands. At the cafe, Michael was already waiting at a table by the window. Mid-aged, wearing glasses, and with slightly tousled hair, he looked exactly as she had imagined, somewhat distant, but focused on his work. Jennifer approached him and, after greeting him, placed the diary in front of him. "This is what I found," she said, opening it to the pages with the cryptic entries. Michael carefully took the diary, his eyes scanning the text, and, frowning, he began to flip through the pages. Several minutes of silence passed as he immersed himself in the writings. "This is incredible," he finally said. "I've heard that some families in our town hid money and valuables during the Great Depression, but I never thought someone would leave such clear instructions." He looked up at Jennifer. "There are too many symbols and references to places that I can't decipher just yet. But if you're willing, We could try to connect them to historical events and locations in the town. It won't be easy, but I see this as more than just a family relic. Of course, Jennifer nodded. I can't do this alone. These entries about the treasure. I have to know what exactly my grandmother wanted to hide and for whom. Michael glanced at the diary again. I think we're in for a real investigation. And to start, I'd like to check some archives and old maps of the town. Maybe we'll find the first clues. With this decision, they ended their meeting, agreeing to begin their joint investigation soon. A few days had passed since their meeting at the cafe, and Jennifer had become increasingly absorbed in her grandmother's diary. She met with Michael regularly, poring over archives and notes, but so far, no clear clues about the treasure's location had surfaced. However, today something changed. They were seated in the town library, surrounded by old maps and historical documents. Michael was carefully studying another page of the diary when suddenly his gaze locked onto one of the entries. Wait, he pointed to a few lines in the middle of the page. This talks about an old barn on the outskirts of town. Look, we hid the first part where our story began. In the place that was always our refuge. This must be the barn that belonged to your family. Jennifer frowned, trying to recall the stories her grandmother used to tell. Yes, I remember. Grandma used to talk about that place when I was little. The barn was part of our old estate, but it was abandoned years ago. I never went there, and then the land was sold and forgotten. Michael nodded, continuing to flip through the pages. There are several hints in the diary about this place. She mentions that they hid something valuable there and that it held great significance for the family. It might be where part of the treasure is. A spark of excitement ignited inside Jennifer. The barn seemed like an obvious place to start the search. It connected the family's history to the events of the Great Depression. And judging by the diary, it was a key location in the treasure's story. We need to go there, she said decisively. If Grandma mentioned this place, then there has to be something there. Even if it's not the whole treasure, it could be the first clue. Michael paused in thought, then nodded. Agreed. This is our first real lead. Let's head there tomorrow. I'll check the old maps and find the exact location of the barn so we don't waste any time. The next morning, Jennifer and Michael set off for the outskirts of town. Where the remnants of the old barn lay hidden among overgrown trees and tall grass. The building had been abandoned for many years. The roof had collapsed in several places, and the wooden walls were covered in mold and cracks. What had once been the pride of the Grace family now stood as a monument to times long gone. There it is, Jennifer whispered, gazing at the barn. It's hard to believe this place once played such an important role for our family. Michael stepped forward, carefully treading over the rotting boards. We need to search everything thoroughly, he said. If something's hidden here, it might be disguised very well. They began exploring the barn. At first glance, everything seemed decrepit. Old wooden beams, crumbling walls, empty corners filled with dust and debris. But then Jennifer noticed something odd about the floor in one of the corners. The planks there were laid differently as if someone had recently disturbed them. Michael, look at this, she called. He approached, and together they started pulling away the old boards. Beneath them, they uncovered a small cavity where something had been buried. However, all they found was an old iron box filled with ancient tools, a clue, but not yet a solution. It looks like something was hidden here, Michael observed, but this is definitely not enough. Perhaps it was only part of what we're looking for. They looked at each other and realized this was only the beginning. With each step, the barn seemed to pull them deeper into the past. The growing silence only emphasized the weight of time that surrounded them. Jennifer and Michael continued to inspect the space, like archaeologists exploring a forgotten world. There has to be something else here, Michael said, crouching over the floor and examining the remaining boards. Places like this rarely leave no traces behind. Jennifer approached an old chest that stood in the corner of the barn, almost blending in with the dim, dust-covered walls. At first, she hadn't paid it any attention, assuming it was just another piece of old junk. But something about it caught her eye. The chest was covered in a layer of dust and cobwebs, but the lock looked relatively fresh as if it had been touched recently. Michael, come here, she called as she attempted to open the chest. He walked over, and together they used a crowbar to pry the lock open. With a slight creak, the lock gave way, and the lid of the chest lifted. Inside were old items, tattered blankets, a few tools, but among them was a scroll of parchment, carefully rolled up. Jennifer gingerly picked it up and unrolled it. It was a map, but not an ordinary one. Instead of typical lines and markings, it contained ancient symbols, drawings that resembled signs, and a few lines of verse written in neat handwriting. On the edge of the map was a cross, with a note beside it, "Where our ancestors rest, you'll find the key to the next path." "This is an old map," Michael muttered, examining it closely. "There are symbols here I've never seen before. But the most important part is this poem. It seems like another riddle." Jennifer read the poem aloud. "Where silent stones do stand, where shadows of the past still lie, the family's seal of mystery will once again reveal the path. Stones, shadows of the past. This must be talking about a cemetery," she said, glancing at Michael. He nodded, considering her words. "Yes, and not just any cemetery. It's probably the old Grace family cemetery on the west side of town. I remember it's been abandoned for years, and no one really goes there. But if the diary and this map are right, there might be something important hidden there." Jennifer studied the map carefully, trying to catch any additional details. The symbols on the map were cryptic, but they clearly meant something. In the center was the image of a tree with massive roots, seemingly pointing to a location. She tried to recall her grandmother's stories about the family cemetery, but nothing came to mind. It had always seemed to her like just a quiet place for the eternal rest of ancestors. But now it was taking on new significance. "Are you sure it's the Grace Cemetery?" she asked doubtfully. "It's been neglected for so long. No one visits it." "That's exactly why it's the perfect place for a hidden treasure," Michael replied. "Think about it. Who would ever search for treasure in a place like that?" They exchanged glances. The old map pointed them to the next destination, and while their path was full of uncertainties, one thing was clear: the cemetery was their next target. "Well," Jennifer sighed, rolling up the map and tucking it into her backpack, "I guess we don't have much of a choice. We have to check it out." "Agreed," Michael said, "and we should do it soon before anyone else figures out what we're searching for." The next morning, Jennifer and Michael were preparing to leave for the Grace family cemetery. A sense of unease about the unknown lay ahead. Jennifer had barely slept that night, her mind racing with the events of the past few days and what they had found in the barn. The old map with its cryptic symbols kept bothering her, and the upcoming visit to the cemetery felt even more ominous. They got into Michael's car and set off. The city quickly gave way to the countryside, with a narrow road winding through dense forests and fields. The path to the cemetery had been almost forgotten, and at one point, they even lost sight of it, forced to slow down. "Do you feel that?" Jennifer broke the silence, glancing at the side mirror. "Feel what?" Michael kept his eyes on the road. But there was a note of tension in his voice. "It seems like someone is following us. I noticed a black SUV behind us. It appeared suddenly, and it's been keeping a distance for several miles. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, but..." Michael glanced briefly in the rearview mirror and frowned. "You're right. That SUV has been following us for a while now." "That's strange." Jennifer shifted nervously in her seat. They were getting closer to the cemetery, and the thought that they were being followed only heightened her anxiety. "Maybe it's just a coincidence," Michael tried to reassure her, but his tone made it clear he wasn't entirely convinced. When they turned off the main road toward the abandoned cemetery, the SUV disappeared from view, but the tension remained. A narrow, overgrown path led them to the old wrought iron gates. Behind them lay rows of leaning gravestones, shrouded in the shadows of ancient trees. The cemetery looked as though it had been forgotten for decades. Moss and vines covered the headstones, and tall grass hid the old pathways. "There it is," Jennifer whispered, surveying the area. They got out of the car and headed toward the old oak tree marked on the map. The shadows cast by the trees intensified the feeling that someone was watching them. Every rustle, every twig snapping underfoot made them jump. "Let's start looking here," Michael suggested, carefully studying the map and comparing it to their surroundings. "The oak is here, so it must be somewhere nearby." They began searching for signs of a hidden cache when suddenly, the sound of footsteps came from behind them. Jennifer quickly turned around and saw several figures approaching. It was the same strangers who had been following them in the SUV. "Looks like we're not alone," Michael whispered, noticing them too. The strangers drew closer, and now their faces became clearer. 3 men, dressed in dark jackets and baseball caps, looked confident and hostile. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped forward, staring intently at Jennifer and Michael. "Looks like you're searching for something that doesn't belong to you either," he said, his expression dark and menacing. "Who are you?" Jennifer demanded, feeling a rising sense of fear. "And what do you want?" "You know why we're here," the man replied coldly. "We know about the map, your grandmother's diary, and the treasure. And trust me, we're not going to let you beat us in this race." Michael stepped forward, trying to remain calm. "We're not here to compete with anyone. This is a family matter," he said firmly. "If you want to search for something, that's your right, but there's no need to turn this into a conflict." The men exchanged glances, but their leader only smirked. "Family matter? Maybe, but the money you're after no longer belongs to your family. It belongs to whoever is willing to take it." The situation was becoming more tense by the second. Jennifer realized that these people knew far more than she had anticipated. Who were they? How did they know about the diary and the treasure? Suddenly, everything seemed far more dangerous than it had at first. "We're not leaving without what belongs to us," the tall man said sharply. "And if you try to stop us, it will end badly for you." Michael took a step back, looking at Jennifer. Their situation had just turned critical. The words of the strangers hung in the air like a threat, ready to ignite the tense atmosphere at the cemetery. Jennifer and Michael exchanged anxious glances, realizing they were in a situation where every move could be decisive. The men surrounding them looked resolute, ready to do whatever it took to achieve their goal. "We're not here to fight," Michael said, trying to defuse the situation. "We just want to understand what's going on. You may not want to fight, but you know that the treasure belongs to your family. It's your personal business, but now it concerns us too," the leader of the group replied, his voice cold and grim. Jennifer's heart pounded in her chest. She turned around and noticed something gleaming in the sunlight on one of the old tombstones a little away from them. It was a piece of marble with a barely readable name. Unable to bear the tension, she headed towards it, trying to focus on something else. "Wait," Michael called, but Jennifer ignored him. She approached the tombstone and saw that there was an inscription at its base. Brushing away the dust, she read, "The great secret lives in the chapel walls. Where light and shadow befriend, the key to the treasure hides." "Look," she exclaimed, turning to Michael and the others. "There's a message here. It's a clue." Quote. Michael came closer, studying the tombstone. "A chapel. I remember there's an old chapel nearby," he said, examining the words. "It's been abandoned for years, but it looks like there might actually be something important there." The group leader, overhearing their conversation, stepped forward, his gaze wary as he looked at Jennifer and Michael. "Are you saying you found a clue?" His voice grew more interested but still carried a hint of menace. "We have a right to know what's going on here," Michael replied. "If you know you're searching for treasure, then maybe you also know it's tied to our history. We should work together." "No, we're not working with you," the leader said coldly. "We'll take it from here. You should leave before this gets too dangerous." With that, he turned and signaled for his companions to follow. They left Jennifer and Michael standing there, but the tension lingered, and it was clear they shouldn't let their guard down. "We need to get out of here," Jennifer whispered, still holding the map and the old message. "We have to check out the chapel." Michael nodded, and they quickly left the cemetery, trying not to look back. The path to the chapel took them through dense trees, and Jennifer felt the fear still gripping her heart. These strangers clearly weren't going to back down, and now they had new information about what they were searching for. When they reached the chapel, it looked as though nature itself had tried to reclaim it. The rusted doors leading inside were slightly ajar, as if someone had tried to enter or leave long ago. "We need to be careful," Michael warned, gently nudging Jennifer forward. "If this clue is correct, we'll need to search very carefully." They stepped inside, greeted by silence broken only by the crackling of the trees outside the window. The chapel's walls were covered with vines, and the old pews had gathered a thick layer of dust. The air smelled of dampness and abandonment. "The key to the treasure must be here somewhere," Jennifer whispered, still clutching the map and the message. They began searching the chapel, examining every detail from the walls to the floor. Jennifer noticed a section of one wall that looked like part of the brickwork had been knocked out. "Look," she exclaimed, "maybe there's something here." She began clearing the area of dust and soon saw that there was a small niche in the wall. Michael leaned closer, bending down to peer inside. "There's nothing in here, but I think it's a sign we're on the right track." Quote. After leaving the chapel, Jennifer and Michael decided they needed to dig deeper into the history of their town, particularly its connection to Jennifer's grandmother, Evelyn Grace. They still had the map with mysterious symbols they had found in the old barn, as well as the message from the tombstone, which hinted at a connection with other notable locations. "We need to visit the local archive," Michael suggested as they got back into the car. "There might be documents about the Grace family, the Great Depression, and other landmarks that could still be around in our town." Jennifer nodded, trying to organize her thoughts. She felt their investigation was becoming more tangled, but she was determined to solve this mystery. At the archive, they were greeted by an elderly librarian, who listened to their request with interest. She directed them to old maps and newspaper clippings, then returned to her duties. Jennifer and Michael began sifting through documents, sharing their findings as they went. "Look, here's an article about the Grace family," Michael said, pointing to a yellowed newspaper clipping. "They were quite well known in the town, especially during the Great Depression. Your grandmother was actively helping locals by raising money and gathering supplies." "That's fascinating," Jennifer remarked, taking the clipping in her hands. "But why did she leave behind these cryptic symbols?" They continued digging through the archives and soon came across historical documents related to events from that era. One such document was a map marking old landmarks, such as the town monument, ancient churches, and even a pond on the outskirts. "Look at this," Michael exclaimed, pointing to the map. "These are the very places that might be connected to the symbols." Jennifer leaned in, paying close attention to his words. The map showed various locations, some marked with letters and symbols similar to those they had found in the diary and on the tombstone. "It looks like my grandmother left us clues leading to these landmarks." Jennifer mused, trying to piece together the puzzle. "Maybe each of these symbols points to something significant." "Exactly, that's what we need," Michael agreed. "We should visit each of these places and see if there are any additional clues." They began noting down the addresses and symbols, planning the next stage of their adventure. However, as they left the archive, Jennifer felt a renewed sense of unease, recalling the strangers who had followed them at the cemetery. She had the nagging feeling that their rivals might appear again at any moment. "We need to be more cautious," she said quietly as they walked towards the car. "Those people who threatened us. I'm not sure we're safe." "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too," Michael replied. "We should move fast to decipher the symbols before they figure out we're onto something." The first place they decided to visit was the town monument. It was a statue erected in honor of local heroes who had helped during hard times. When they arrived, Jennifer and Michael began inspecting the monument, carefully studying its details. "There has to be something here," Jennifer whispered, running her hand over the marble surface. Finally, she noticed that one of the tiles at the base of the statue was slightly raised. When they lifted the tile, they uncovered a small cylindrical container hidden from plain sight. "There could be something important inside," Jennifer exclaimed, pulling the container out from under the tile. They opened it and found an old note with another set of symbols and a clue. "It looks like we're on the right track," Michael said, studying the note. "Now we have another clue for the next location." As they examined the note, they began to realize that all these symbols were part of a larger picture, connecting them to the Grace family history and its legacy. Jennifer felt they were getting closer to solving the puzzle with each step, but at the same time, her worry about their rivals grew. She knew they were still out there, likely watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. The next day, determined to continue their investigation, Jennifer and Michael set out to visit several other locations marked on the map. Their first stop was an old park, where, according to the records, there was a monument connected to the Grace family history. They strolled through the well-kept paths, but to their disappointment, the monument turned out to be just a piece of marble with barely legible inscriptions. Jennifer felt her hope waning when an elderly man with a kind smile approached them. "Hello, young folks. I see you're interested in the history of our town," he said, squinting in the sunlight. "Do you know what you're digging for?" "We're searching for clues about a family treasure," Jennifer replied, a bit embarrassed. "It's connected to my grandmother, Evelyn Grace." The old man suddenly stopped, his eyes lighting up with recognition. Evelyn? Ah, she was a true soul of our town, he said with a smile, stroking his chin. I was her friend during those tough times when we all struggled through the Great Depression. Quote. Jennifer felt a surge of hope. You knew her? She asked, hanging on to every word. Can you tell us about her? The old man settled onto a bench and gestured for them to sit next to him. My name is Harry, he introduced himself. Evelyn was always at the forefront, helping anyone in need. She organized food and clothing drives and raised funds for those who lost their jobs. Sometimes, she would sleep at the church, helping the homeless. That sounds impressive, Michael said, genuinely admiring her efforts. We're researching her legacy and looking for a treasure she may have left behind. Do you have any memories or clues that could help us? Harry pondered for a moment as if trying to recall something significant. I remember her often talking about symbols. She used them in her notes to describe different places that could help people. I think she left something to guide those who would seek her help in the future. Jennifer and Michael exchanged glances. Do you know where she might have left these symbols? Jennifer asked, filled with hope. There's one place she often mentioned. It's an old church on the outskirts of town. I can take you there if you'd like, Harry offered, rising from the bench. Jennifer and Michael eagerly agreed, realizing this could be another step toward unraveling their mystery. They quickly made their way to the car, and soon they were heading out of the town center. As they drove, Harry shared more stories about Evelyn, painting a picture of a woman whose compassion knew no bounds. He spoke of the community gatherings she organized and the joy she brought to the lives of those around her, rekindling Jennifer's determination to uncover her grandmother's legacy. When they arrived at the old church, it stood solemnly among the trees, its weathered facade telling tales of years gone by. This church was a second home to Evelyn, Harry explained. She would spend hours here, helping those in need. I believe she left something important inside. Quote. Jennifer and Michael stepped out of the car, hearts racing with anticipation. They followed Harry into the church, where the air felt heavy with history. Dust motes floated in the sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the floor. As they explored the interior, Jennifer's eyes were drawn to a corner where an old wooden altar stood, partially covered by dust and cobwebs. Could this be where she left something? She wondered aloud. Harry nodded. It's possible. She always had a knack for hiding things in plain sight. They approached the altar, examining the area carefully. Michael noticed a small crack in the wood and knelt down to inspect it more closely. Jennifer, come here. I think I found something, he called, his voice filled with excitement. Jennifer hurried over, and they both peered into the crack. It was just wide enough to slip a finger in. With a little effort, Michael managed to pry open a small compartment hidden beneath the altar. Inside, they found an old leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Jennifer's heart raced as she opened it, revealing handwritten notes and sketches. These might be the symbols we've been looking for, she exclaimed, flipping through the pages eagerly. As they studied the journal, Harry watched with a knowing smile. You're on the right path, my friends. Evelyn's legacy is still very much alive. Keep searching, and you'll uncover the truth. With newfound determination, Jennifer and Michael realized they were closer than ever to unlocking the secrets of the Grace family. But they also knew that time was of the essence. Their rivals were still lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce at the slightest hint of their progress. As they arrived at the old church, Jennifer was struck by its condition. It was a large building, surrounded by dense trees and underbrush. The exterior of the church leaves much to be desired, Jennifer remarked, examining the weathered roof and boarded-up windows. It looks like it hasn't been used in ages. Yes, time has unfortunately taken its toll here. But this place was always important to Evelyn. She helped many people right here, Harry explained. They approached closer, and Jennifer noticed an old sign lying at the entrance, its inscription almost worn away by the years. She bent down to read it, but the words were indecipherable. If she left something here, it could be tied to her work helping others, Jennifer said, feeling a thrill of excitement. Let's go inside. Harry, watching them closely, nodded and opened the old door. It creaked on its hinges as if protesting against their intrusion. Inside, there was complete silence. Dusty light filtered through the boarded-up windows, creating a mysterious atmosphere. Jennifer sensed that here, among the old wooden pews, lay many memories and perhaps traces of her grandmother. She often gathered people here, Harry said, surveying the empty space. In difficult times, this place became a refuge for those in need of support. Quote. Jennifer and Michael began to explore the room, their hearts racing with anticipation. They knew that something significant could be hidden in this place, and every step brought them closer to the answer. It seems we're not alone, Michael noted, glancing around. His eyes stopped on a shadow moving behind one of the windows. Jennifer felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. Maybe we should be more careful? She asked, looking around cautiously. Harry nodded, his face becoming serious. Yes, stay vigilant. If someone is searching for the treasure, they may be watching you. With those words, they continued to investigate the church, prepared to face any surprises that might await them. As they moved deeper into the church, they found a small room off to the side, its door slightly ajar. Jennifer pushed it open, and inside, they discovered dusty shelves filled with old books and records. Look at this, Michael said, pulling out a thick, leather-bound book. It seems to be a ledger of the donations and support Evelyn provided during the Great Depression. Quote. Jennifer rushed over, her eyes scanning the pages. Names of families, amounts donated, and heartfelt notes filled the book. It was a testament to her grandmother's dedication to the community. This is amazing. It really shows how much she cared, Jennifer said, her voice filled with admiration. But we need to find the symbols she left behind. As they continued to search the room, Jennifer noticed a small wooden box tucked away on a high shelf. Can you reach that? She asked, pointing to the box. Michael nodded and climbed onto a nearby chair. He carefully retrieved the box and handed it to Jennifer. Let's see what's inside, he said, his excitement palpable. With trembling hands, Jennifer opened the box. Inside, she found a collection of small trinkets, an old key, a piece of jewelry, and a folded piece of parchment covered in strange symbols. This must be it, she exclaimed, unfolding the parchment. The symbols matched those they had seen in the journal and on the map. Harry leaned closer, his eyes widening in recognition. These symbols, they were a part of Evelyn's work. Each one corresponds to a location she believed was important for future generations to discover. Jennifer's heart raced. This is incredible. We have to decipher them. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from outside, startling them. The sound of footsteps and voices filled the air, and Jennifer felt her stomach drop. Someone's coming, Michael whispered urgently. Harry's expression turned serious. We need to hide, quickly. They hurriedly placed the trinkets back in the box and moved to a shadowy corner of the room, holding their breath as the footsteps drew closer. Jennifer's heart pounded in her chest as she peered around the edge of the door, trying to see who was approaching. As the door creaked open, a group of men entered the church, their faces obscured by shadows. Jennifer recognized one of them, the leader from the cemetery. Search the place, he ordered his companions. His voice low and menacing. They can't be far. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat. They were in danger, and the men were looking for them. Michael glanced at her, his eyes wide with fear. They needed a plan. As the men began to spread out, Jennifer spotted a narrow staircase leading up to the church's loft. Up there, she whispered urgently to Michael and Harry. Without a moment to lose, they quietly slipped toward the stairs, hoping to find safety and a vantage point to see what the men were doing. As they ascended, Jennifer could hear the men rummaging through the church, their voices growing louder. This isn't good, she thought, her mind racing. They had to find a way to get out of this situation without losing the precious clues they had just uncovered. Once at the top, they peered through a small window, watching as the men searched the main room below, their frustration palpable. They must have left something behind, the leader growled. Keep looking. Jennifer's heart raced as she realized that time was running out. They needed to find a way to escape before they were discovered. The sun was beginning to set as Jennifer, Michael, and Harry finished their exploration of the old church. They had found several antique items, including records and small symbols that appeared to be connected to Evelyn's work. However, the tense atmosphere and the unease about the strangers made their discoveries feel shrouded in uncertainty. Just as they were about to leave the church, Jennifer suddenly sensed that someone was watching them. Do you have a feeling that we're not alone? She asked, turning to Harry and Michael. I feel it too, Michael confirmed, clenching his fists tensely. Let's hurry. They stepped outside, but to their horror, a group of people in dark clothing stood at the entrance of the church. They had cold stares and confident expressions that made Jennifer's blood run cold. "You have things that we need," one of the men said, stepping forward. His voice was quiet but firm. "Hand over everything you found." Quote. Jennifer clutched her discoveries to herself as if that could protect them. "Who are you? What do you want from us?" she asked, trying to sound confident. "We're here to ensure the proper use of these items. They belong to our group, and you have no right to keep them," replied one of the women standing next to the man. Her voice was cold and authoritative. "We're not giving you anything," Michael said sharply, stepping into a protective stance beside Jennifer and Harry. "These items are important to the history of our town, and we have the right to study them." The man took a step forward, his face contorting with anger. "You don't understand who you're dealing with. We have the means to get what we want, and you don't want to cross us." Jennifer felt her heart race. She had never imagined she would find herself in such a dangerous situation. "We're just searching for the truth about a treasure," she said, trying to remain calm. "It's related to my grandmother and her legacy. Your search doesn't matter if it interferes with our goals," the man declared, his voice threatening. "We know you have evidence that could lead to this treasure. Hand it over, and you'll avoid trouble." Harry, standing behind them, suddenly spoke up. "Evelyn always said that such treasures are meant to help people, not for greed. We can't just give them to you." The woman smirked at Harry. "That's your opinion, old man. But if you don't want to get hurt, I suggest you think carefully about who you're dealing with." The tension escalated. Jennifer felt fear and anger boiling within her. "You can't threaten us," she asserted, trying to speak with conviction. "We won't give you anything until we know what you plan to do with it." "Don't forget that we have the resources to resolve this matter," the man said, his voice sounding as though he had already made up his mind. "Don't make us take action." They took a step back, but Jennifer knew this wasn't the end. "We will be watching you," the woman threw back before they vanished into the twilight. As the group left, Jennifer exhaled, realizing how tense they had become. "We can't stay here," Michael said, his voice filled with concern. "We need to find shelter and figure out what to do next." Harry nodded, his face focused. "I know a safe place where we can discuss our next steps." "Let's go, and be careful." They quickly returned to the car and headed toward Harry's house. Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that their search had hit a dead end, and now they would have to fight not only for the treasure but also for their lives. When they arrived at Harry's house, Jennifer felt an overwhelming weight on her shoulders. The tense atmosphere created by the threats from the secret group only heightened her anxiety. Harry led them into a small but cozy room with a table surrounded by chairs. The walls were adorned with old photographs and documents that reflected the town's history. "Please, have a seat," Harry said, his voice soothing. "We need to discuss what we found and what to do next." Jennifer sat down, hanging on to Harry's every word. "I feel like we need to know more about the Grace family," she said, leaning forward. "I can't shake the feeling that there's something in our history that we don't understand." Harry looked at her as if he could sense her thoughts. "There's something I wanted to talk to you about," he said, his tone becoming more serious. "It concerns your grandfather." "My grandfather?" Jennifer exclaimed. "I know almost nothing about him. He left when my mom was little." Harry took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. He was part of a group of people who decided to hide the treasure during the Great Depression. They believed that this money should be used to help the poor and needy, not for personal gain. Jennifer froze. This information overwhelmed her. "So, my grandfather was one of those who decided to hide the treasure?" she asked, trying to grasp the news. "Yes, exactly," Harry confirmed. "It was a risky move, and many of them were willing to do whatever it took to protect the people. They understood that the treasure could fall into the wrong hands and cause even greater suffering." Michael, sitting next to her, was also stunned. "So your family didn't just have the treasure, but they made a decision to prevent its use for selfish purposes," he noted. "That changes everything. Why didn't anyone tell me about this?" Jennifer asked, feeling her heart clench. "Why were there no mentions of my grandfather and his actions?" Harry looked at her with sympathy. "People often prefer to hide difficult truths to protect themselves and their loved ones. Perhaps it was done with good intentions, but now you need to know the truth." Jennifer felt her perspective on her family shift. She had always thought her grandfather simply abandoned them without leaving any legacy. Now she realized he had made a choice to protect others, even at the cost of his own family. "What should I do with this information?" she asked, feeling a wave of uncertainty wash over her. "We need to find a way to use this story to our advantage," Michael said. "If your family is indeed involved in this, perhaps they left behind some clues or keys that can help us understand where the treasure actually is." "Exactly," Harry agreed. "You need to delve into your family history. This could be your most crucial step toward uncovering the whole truth." Jennifer pondered. This new information opened doors she had never imagined. She had the opportunity not only to find the treasure but also to understand who her ancestors were and what role they played in the lives of others. "I want to learn more," she said resolutely. "I want to understand how my family truly impacted our town." Harry and Michael nodded, and Jennifer felt a new determination rising within her. She was ready to investigate and overcome obstacles to discover how her family could have used the treasure and what other secrets lay hidden in their history. With renewed purpose and understanding, Jennifer decided that this journey would lead her not only to a material inheritance but also to a profound understanding of her lineage. The next morning, Jennifer, Michael, and Harry gathered at Harry's house, where they were reviewing Evelyn's journal entries. The last entry, which appeared clearer and more coherent, was a clue leading to the treasure's final location. "Look at this," Jennifer said, turning the page. She pointed to the handwritten note. "At the old mill, where the water whispers and the wind sings, you will find what you seek, a treasure that protects the light." "An old mill?" Michael exclaimed, his eyes widening with excitement. "I know that place. It's just outside of town, near the river. I heard it was one of the first mills in the area," Harry added. "It hasn't been used for a long time, and it's become part of our town's legends. Some say it holds many secrets." Jennifer felt a surge of hope. This was the last place they were searching for, and she couldn't miss this chance. "We need to go there as soon as possible," she said, not waiting for their agreement. "The sooner we get to the mill, the better." Gathering their things, Jennifer, Michael, and Harry left the house and got into the car. On the way, they discussed what other mysteries might await them at the old mill and what treasures could be hidden there. "If this mill really holds a treasure, I'm sure it has some mechanisms or hidden passages," Michael remarked. "We need to be ready for anything." When they arrived at the site, Jennifer saw the old mill majestically rising against the backdrop of green fields. Its wooden structures were covered in moss, and the windows were boarded up. A profound silence surrounded the area, broken only by the sounds of nature. "This place looks like it's straight out of a fairy tale," Jennifer whispered as she stepped out of the car. They approached the mill slowly, and Jennifer noticed old stones and remnants of the structure scattered around it. Her heart raced with excitement and anticipation. "Apparently, not many people come here," Harry said, surveying the area. "This could work to our advantage." They began to explore the grounds around the mill, looking for any signs that might indicate the treasure's location. Jennifer walked around the mill and noticed something strange. On one of the stones were symbols that she had seen in the journal. "Look," she called out, rushing to the stone. "These symbols." Michael joined her and examined the symbols. "They're exactly like those on the monuments and records we found," he said. "This seems like a key to the puzzle. That means we're on the right track," Jennifer exclaimed, filled with determination. "Let's explore the mill." They headed toward the door together. The old wooden door creaked as Jennifer pushed it open. Inside was dark and damp. Small beams of light filtered through cracks in the walls, creating an eerie atmosphere. "It's really dark in here," Michael noted, pulling out a flashlight. "Be careful." They cautiously entered, listening for any sounds, and soon found themselves in a spacious room. Inside the mill were old machines and bags of flour, and it appeared that no one had cleaned in ages. Dust swirled in the air, and every step they took produced a quiet sound. Jennifer began to examine the space, her attention drawn to an old wooden beam that looked suspicious. "I think there might be a hidden passage here," she said, pointing to the beam. "Let's check it out." She pulled Michael and Harry along, and they began to investigate that part of the mill. Jennifer moved closer to the beam and suddenly noticed a small indentation on it. "Maybe this is a mechanism," she said, feeling it with her fingers. Michael joined her, and they both began to press on the beam. Suddenly, there was a crack, and part of the wall opened, revealing an entrance to a dark corridor. "We found a passage," Jennifer exclaimed, her voice echoing in the darkness. Now they had everything. The place and the mystery waiting to be uncovered. They exchanged glances, filled with determination, and stepped into the unknown. This was their chance to solve the final puzzle and learn the truth about the treasure their family had hidden for so long. The darkness of the corridor enveloped Jennifer, Michael, and Harry as they cautiously moved forward, directing their flashlight beams onto the moldy, cobweb-covered walls. Jennifer's heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear. Every echo of their footsteps made her wonder what awaited them in this mysterious place. "We need to be careful," Michael whispered, his voice low but steady. "We don't know what we might encounter inside." They reached the end of the corridor, and ahead loomed a slightly ajar door, coated in dust and old paint. Jennifer stepped forward and tugged at the handle, which creaked open with reluctance. The door groaned as it revealed a narrow room bathed in shadow. Inside, they saw an old wooden chest in the corner. Its surface was covered in a layer of dust, but remnants of metal fittings were still visible. Jennifer felt her heart quicken. "This could be what we've been searching for," she said, pointing at the chest. "Let's open it," Harry replied, his voice filled with anticipation. They rushed to the chest and began carefully lifting the lid. It resisted at first but finally creaked open, revealing a trove of glimmering gold coins reflecting the light of their flashlights, along with old documents neatly wrapped in a leather folder. "This is incredible," Jennifer exclaimed, unable to believe her eyes. She reached in and pulled out the first coin, feeling its weight and cold metal against her palm. "This is a real treasure," Michael said, examining the contents of the chest. "But we need to check the documents. They might tell us why all this is here." Harry quickly retrieved the folder and opened it. The first pages were yellowed with age, but the neat handwriting was clear. "These are letters," Harry observed, flipping through the pages. "They mention how these funds were intended to help the poor." Jennifer rushed to Harry's side to peer into the folder. "Read what it says," she urged, a thrill of excitement coursing through her. Harry began reading aloud. "In these coins lie the funds collected to aid the residents of our town during times of great hardship. We, the members of the community, decided to hide them so they would not fall into the wrong hands and would be used for the benefit of those in need." Jennifer felt a bubbling mix of joy and pride. This was exactly what she had hoped for when reading her grandmother's diary. The treasure was indeed meant to help people. "We've found more than just gold," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is a symbol of our family, our history. We can do something good with it." Michael nodded, his face lit with understanding. "Now we have the opportunity to help many people," he said. "This discovery will not only change your life but the lives of countless others." Harry, still reading, stumbled upon another crucial entry. It says here that, besides the money, some of these funds were intended to create a charity. So this isn't just a treasure, it's a chance to help people in our town. Jennifer felt her heart swell with resolve. "We need to return this to the people. My grandmother and grandfather's legacy must be used for its intended purpose." Michael, sensing her fervor, added, "But we have to be careful. The secret group we encountered will also want to get their hands on this money. We need to protect this treasure." Harry hunched over, realizing the seriousness of the situation. "We have to think about how to do this right. We need to inform people about our findings and create a plan to use these funds for the good." Gathered together, they began discussing how best to organize their actions. Every word was filled with hope and determination. Their goal was now clear, not only to uncover the treasure but also to use it to help people, just as Evelyn had envisioned. In Jennifer's heart, a feeling grew that they stood on the brink of a new life, where their family history regained its meaning. And though challenges lay ahead, she knew that together they could face any obstacles. In the silence of the old mill, surrounded by golden coins and documents, Jennifer realized the immense responsibility resting on her shoulders. This was not just a treasure, it was her family's legacy, meant to help others. She understood that by accepting this responsibility, they had to act in a way that honored her grandmother's and grandfather's wishes. "We need to establish a fund," Jennifer said, looking at Michael and Harry. Their eyes were filled with support and understanding. "A fund that will help people in our town, just as it was intended." Michael nodded, his face glowing with approval. "That's the right decision. Evelyn and the other community members left us not just money, but a chance to change lives." Harry, still poring over the documents, added, "If we can restore the fund, we can use these resources to provide assistance in various areas: education, healthcare, and support for those in need." Jennifer felt her confidence growing. She was ready for this challenge. "Let's discuss how we can make this happen," she proposed, leaning closer to the chest. "We have all the documents we need. I'm sure we can contact local authorities to find out what's required." Michael picked up the folder and began to sift through its contents. "We'll need to register the fund, draft a plan, and maybe gather a team to help us with this." "Yes, and we should inform the residents about our discovery," Harry added. "People need to know that this treasure is meant for them. Trust is essential." Inside Jennifer, a new hope sparked. She recalled those who had suffered in their town, families who had lost everything during crises. "I want everyone to know that this treasure is not just money. It's a chance to start anew," she said with determination. "We can organize events, create assistance programs, and use these resources as intended." Michael stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm with you. We'll do this together. You have our support." They began discussing the specific steps they needed to take. Jennifer knew that a lot of work lay ahead, but it didn't frighten her. Each step brought her closer to her goal: to help people and return the treasure to their community. As they left the old mill, the world outside was filled with sunlight. Jennifer looked at her friends and felt that this was not just the beginning of their work on the fund. It was the start of a new chapter in her life. Together with Michael and Harry, they decided that the first priority was to hold a meeting with the locals. This would be an opportunity to share their discovery and announce the creation of the fund. Jennifer suggested gathering people at the community center, where they could discuss what programs and assistance the town needed most. "We can create posters and spread the word through social media," Michael proposed, his voice brimming with energy. "That's a great idea," Jennifer replied enthusiastically. "We need as many people as possible to come." They began developing their plan, and in the process, Jennifer felt her fears and doubts gradually dissipate, replaced by confidence and resolve. She understood that a lot of work lay ahead, but now it was work filled with purpose. When they returned to town, Jennifer was energized. She knew that with the help of her friends and like-minded individuals, they could create something truly meaningful. The treasure found in the mill would be the start of a new life for many. And she was ready to do everything to make it a reality. The next morning, Jennifer was already full of energy. She gathered all her notes, outlined an action plan, and was prepared to take the first step toward realizing her dream: the revival of the aid fund that would become a living legacy of her grandmother and grandfather. Months had passed since Jennifer, Michael, and Harry discovered the treasure in the old mill. The efforts to restore the aid fund were in full swing, and along with it, the town itself was experiencing a revival. Every week, Jennifer gathered with the locals to discuss how best to use the resources to support those in need. The involvement of the community was inspiring. During meetings, they shared ideas and suggestions on how to improve life in the town. The fund had become a genuine hub of community life. Jennifer organized charitable events that raised funds to assist children, the elderly, and many others facing hardships. Local schools and organizations began to receive support they had never even dreamed of before. Recently, a busload of volunteers from neighboring counties arrived to help renovate the old club that had been abandoned for years. This was another testament to the real changes the fund was bringing about. During one of the meetings held in the refurbished club building, Jennifer addressed the crowd. "Each of you has made what we have today possible. Thanks to your efforts and generosity, we can help those in need. This is not just a fund, it is a community that cares for one another." Tears of joy and gratitude sparkled in the eyes of those gathered. Jennifer felt an atmosphere of unity and hope enveloping her. People were beginning to believe in their strength and potential once again. Every evening, Jennifer returned home tired but happy. She continued to read her grandmother's diary, discovering new insights and inspiration each time. It felt as if Evelyn were whispering to her, reassuring her that she was on the right path. One day, while walking through the town, Jennifer encountered an old friend of her grandmother's named Loretta. She approached Jennifer with a warm smile. "I see how you're changing this town. Evelyn would be proud of you. You're carrying on her legacy." These words touched Jennifer deeply. She felt a spark in her heart, igniting her desire to continue her family's work. In that moment, she realized that her calling was not just to manage the fund, but to inspire people, unite them, and give them hope for a brighter future. This was her true purpose. With each new project and initiative, Jennifer felt her connection with her grandmother strengthening. She knew that their story lived on within her and in everyone who supported the fund. One evening, as she sat in her office writing plans for the upcoming week, her gaze fell on a photograph capturing her grandmother with smiling people. Jennifer smiled and thought about the importance of remembering her heritage and continuing the traditions. At that moment, she understood that everything they had done was the beginning of a new era for their town. This was not just work, it was the mission of her life. The treasure found in the mill had given her not only resources but also meaning. She was ready to continue this journey, making the world a better place, step by step. The town was being revitalized, and with it, the hopes and dreams of its residents were being restored. Jennifer, filled with determination, knew she was not alone. Each step was part of something bigger, and her grandmother was always with her. That evening, gazing at the stars, Jennifer felt her soul filled with light. She had found her place in this world and understood that everything she did was worthwhile. This was her legacy, her true calling, and she was ready to move forward with pride and love.